Hello, I am Adela Talbot, and I am a board member of Women in Politics. Women in Politics has launched the 2020 Ask Her campaign as part of an effort to encourage women to consider running for office in an upcoming election at any level of government. This campaign's primary goal is to support all women who would like to become involved with politics by sharing the experiences, perspectives, and advice of other women who have already entered this arena. We will hear from women who previously served in public office, from current elected officials, and women who have run in the past. All women will offer their advice and experience to help inspire other women to enter the race. Above all, we want to achieve the goal of having more women's voices at decision-making tables. Today, we welcome Kelly Elliott, who is the Deputy Mayor of the municipality of Thames Centre. I know she is no stranger to this conversation. So Kelly, thank you for joining us. I am going
Thank you for having me.
Very happy to have you. So I will give you kind of a rundown of questions and topics that you could touch on if you like, but certainly you could take this in any direction that you like. You could start by telling us about the moment that you decided to run, sort of what led to that decision, what questions you needed to answer to make the decision. I know that you have family history that brought you to the table, but certainly your experience is what we're looking for here. Anything along those lines, something about hurdles that you have overcome in order to commit to running, expectations leading up to your campaign, how your experience lined up with your expectations, how it differed, anything that surprised you, things like that. And so if none of that kind of keeps you going, I've got some questions to prompt you along the way, but perhaps we can start just by starting a conversation about the moment that you decided to run.
Sure. So about 7 years ago, a friend, Arden, and I started a local group called I Love Thorndale. And the reason we started it was because we were starting to see growth in our community. We had lots of service groups, volunteers, businesses. And we thought the best way to move our community forward was to bring everyone to the table and see how we could work together, break down those silos. So we started doing that, and soon we began to realize there was a disconnect between our community and our local government, that there were things our community wanted, but it wasn't reaching the horseshoe. And so it became very clear that we needed an advocate at the horseshoe that would be a strong voice for our community. And so as the election year started to come back in 2014, there started to be a push that maybe I would be a good candidate to run. And I was sitting kind of at that table. I had an interest in politics. As you mentioned, I have a family history. So my grandfather served municipally as well as a federal MP as well. And so I always knew that I would eventually follow in his footsteps. I always say I always thought I would do it when I fit in the old part of the old boys club. I thought it would be kind of a when I first ran, I was 28 and had no intention of running that young, but the community really started to push me. I started to get, I started to get more comments. And so it probably took a couple months for me to make that decision. I discussed it with my family. I obviously discussed it with my grandfather and get his perspective on it. I will never forget the moment his eyes lit up when he realized I was following in his footsteps. But yeah, it probably took a couple months for me to make that decision. But when the time came to sign up, I did. And it was a lot to put myself out there, for sure. I think when I first ran in 2014, I ran against 3 men. I ran against the incumbent. I ran against a former fire chief of the township. And I ran against a local farmer. So I definitely thought I was the underdog in that race. I probably didn't have as much confidence in myself, just because, when you're going up against, people who you see at, and you don't normally see women at the table, especially in rural areas, and especially at that time too. I didn't think I would win, but I thought it was a great learning experience to kind of get myself out there. my grandpa told me, you need to talk to everybody. You need to knock on every door. And that's what I did. I was the only candidate who did it. I knocked on every single door in my ward when I ran. And I heard comments. There was a lot of encouraging comments, but there were a lot such as, women don't belong there. You're too young. You need more experience. A lot of comments like that. And those, when you hear them, are like just a punch to your gut. They're just, they knock you down for a bit, and then you realize, what, you just got to keep going. Like you put your name out there. You just got to prove yourself wrong. And that's what I did. And I just kept pushing. I kept campaigning. I just did everything I could. Election night, and sorry, I didn't have a campaign team either. Like my campaign team was my parents and my grandma. And I worked a full-time job, so campaigning was after my full-time job. I'd pack up dinner in a lunch bag for my kids, put them in the back of the car, and start going. Campaigning in a rural area is different than in an urban area. You're driving to every single house, but my mom or my dad or my grandpa would drive me, and I'd be a passenger, and I would get out in the car, and they'd turn the car around and wait for me while I went in. And yeah, campaign night, again, I wasn't, or election night, I wasn't very confident. I just had my parents, a couple friends over, and just waited for the election results to come in. I think at one point I was crying in my mom's arms, just being like, why did I do this? And I won, and it was crazy. Like it was absolutely crazy. I didn't expect it at all by any means. My grandpa, he was working on the tractor that night, and I called him after he was done to tell him that I won, and he was so excited. And I went down the next morning, and he had already, I don't know what that was. He called me, I went down the next morning to see him, and he had already printed off a copy of the election results, and he carried those election results in his pocket for, I think, 2 months after the election to show everyone that I won. So that was amazing, to say the least. But I guess, you just have to have confidence in yourself, and you can't see the sign behind me, but the sign behind me says prove them wrong, and that's just what I have to keep doing, because even when I ran for deputy mayor in 2018, I think it was, the comments that I heard were even worse. They were, definitely that women shouldn't be there, that women are too emotional to be on council, that I had one woman say she would support me only because she was supporting the male candidate as the male beside him to keep him in line. So she was supporting me. So it's, you just got to prove them wrong. And, there's a famous saying, you get out of bed every morning to, because you have a lot of people to prove wrong, and that's the biggest thing. I think probably the biggest piece of advice I learned running in both elections. As for expectations on the campaign trail, I don't know really what. 2014, I think I expected everybody would love me as a candidate and would support me. That wasn't the case at every door, but again, you just have to put yourself out there and take the good with the bad. And sometimes the bad is always the loudest, and it hurts the most what you carry with you as you keep going. But you just have to have that support group around you. You have to have whatever it is, whether you have friends, family, I have to have my close friends that I can vent with and tell them everything. I don't need to be political with them and the F-bomb every few words when I'm frustrated and upset with what's going on. But it is really important, because being in politics is tough. It really is, and it's unfortunate it's this way. They always say you have to have a tough skin, and I keep trying to say you don't. You really be able to do this. You should be able to be respected as a person. That's not the case right now. And I have an 11-year-old daughter who is exactly like me and will probably, I'm sure, the way she argues with me most days. But so for me, it's when she runs that she doesn't experience the same things I do. That's the reason why I just keep going. And that's what people tell me sometimes, is just that, not that I hate to see them, I find it hard to see it that way, that I'm blazing a trail, because I look at all the women who are blazing the trail for me and think that, you know what, I'm not part of it necessarily, but when you hear that, a trail for the people behind me, and I do think of it some way as my daughter, is that I don't want them to go through and hear the things that I hear, because women absolutely deserve a spot at the table. We bring different perspectives, and I think that's what's so important about women. The perspectives that we bring. You know, I have, when I started, my kids were younger. Things that were important to me were libraries, recreation, daycare, education, things like that. And you know, for the typical stereotype of, you know, a 50+ old white male, that might not be their take on things, right? And some of those decisions, I know here in Thames Center, our mayor is a female also, and we've taken a lot of focus on doing family events. You know, for Halloween, we handed out candy at the municipal office, and it's that might not have gotten the attention before, but when you put women in leadership roles, all of a sudden those little things mean the big things to families. And what I love is just those little things that you never think of. That just...
Thank you, Kelly. That was. So Kelly, I'm wondering if you could touch a little bit on the rural experience of being a woman in politics in a rural setting. I think that will, you already touched on it a little bit in terms of some of the things that were important to you when you were campaigning, when your children were younger, but I'm wondering if you could touch a little bit just about the setting itself. I think that can add a lot to the general conversation that we're having about women in politics right now.
Sure. So from a rural perspective, I think it's, you know, maybe 10 years ago, I would say it's a lot different than it is now. You're definitely seeing a lot more women in politics in rural areas. At Middlesex County right now, we have gender parity on our council, which is excellent to see. And we recently just launched our Women's Caucus of Middlesex County Council, so we can focus on women's issues here in the county. And I'm really excited to hear about, I'm really excited to start that and hear the issues that are impacting women, because again, I think for so long, women not necessarily weren't left behind, but their voices weren't amplified by any means in what was happening in their needs. And so I'm really excited about that, and to launch it and to hear, you know, we hear about women's issues across the country, across the province. Most of them are in urban settings because that's just what grabs the news headlines. So I'm excited to hear about what's happening here in the rural areas. And I know already, being in a rural setting, I live, you know, I live on a back gravel road, so I get as rural as you get. But I know a lot of the issues that are in urban settings impact us, and just in different ways too. You know, we were talking, the Women's Caucus met this morning, and we were chatting just about childcare and how, you know, we live in a lot of tight-knit communities here where women look after other children's women, and you know, if I'm caught in a tough spot, I can call my neighbor, or who happens to be one of my cousins, and she can go pick up my kids from school and things like that. But COVID has just put a different perspective on that, because that can't happen right now. You know, when you get a call from your kid's school, it's you have to go pick them up. And so yeah, I'm excited to hear about what's impacting and how we can help the women. And again, that it just shows when women are in leadership roles, what happens is we have things like the Women's Caucus and bringing women's issues to the forefront. Because I think if there was a caucus of, or if there was a council of 11 men or 12 men, that wouldn't have happened. And I mean, it's never happened in the past. So
It was the caucus actually that made me ask that, because it's definitely relevant and topical. If you could offer some guidance or some advice to a woman who's probably just dabbling, you know, with the idea of maybe I want to run, what would be some of the steps that you would recommend this person takes? Maybe some guidance from your perspective and your experience. I know you gave a little bit of that when you were first starting out, but if you could touch on that a little bit more. So like if you were directly speaking to somebody who is thinking of running right now in today's climate.
I think if you're interested in running right now and getting involved in whatever level of government it is, definitely reach out to other elected officials, and whether it's male colleagues or female colleagues, just reach out and find out what the issues are that are in your community. Talk to them, talk to things that are happening. I know when I first ran in 2014, I thought I knew all the issues, and I thought I knew everything that was happening, and that was so far from the truth. So just reach out and ask lots of questions. Like, don't be afraid to ask tough questions. Don't be afraid to ask what might be silly questions. Get their experience, because you know, when I first got on council, in 2014, I didn't have that. I didn't have anyone that I could ask those things to. And looking back, I wish I did. And I wish I would have, you know, stepped up and reached out to other female councillors in other areas and got their perspectives, because yeah, that would have definitely changed things in 2014. Being where I am now, I'm much more eager to ask questions and to reach out to people and to network and build my network. But that wasn't the case in 2014. So I think that would be my best advice, is just to reach out to people and listen and ask questions, and don't be afraid. I mean, you know, my contact information is out there. I'm all over social media. If anyone wants to ask questions, I'm here, but anyone that you feel comfortable with.
That's great. Thank you so much. You touched a little bit. I just want to follow up on something you mentioned earlier, just the topic of confidence. So I know that that's a common thing for many people, and a common barrier in kind of getting up. How do you overcome that?
Yeah, I think that's a tough one. I think, you know, when you decide to put your name out there, it's a big deal, and it's not going to be easy. And again, it's surrounding yourself with people and that will be there to support you, that will be there when, you know, you get those punches in the guts that are, you don't deserve to be there, you know, women shouldn't be at the horseshoe, you're too young, things like that. Have those people around you that will support you and will build up your confidence, because that's what you really need. I mean, I had my grandpa, I had my mom, I had my husband, I had my friends around me to do that. And that's really important, because right now in politics, it's easy to get knocked down if you don't have a support system around you. So just build your support system and have positive people around you that will build up your confidence and will help you stay confident.
Wonderful. Is there something that I wouldn't know to ask you about, or that you would wish I would ask, that you would want to touch on?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. No, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, I think so. You did a great job. That was awesome. Yeah.